The massive doors of the Grand Assembly Hall opened with a sound like thunder. Captain Ji-Hun Park walked through them, his boots clicking on the crystal floor. Around him, hundreds of alien beings sat in their seats, all watching him with different kinds of eyes. Some had 4 eyes, some had none. Some were tall as trees, others small as children. But they all looked at him with the same feeling: fear mixed with disgust. Ji-Hun kept his back straight as he walked to the center of the hall. The human diplomatic ship had traveled for 3 months to get here, to Nexus Prime, the heart of the Galactic Council. Now he stood alone in front of beings from 1,000 different worlds, all united in one thing. They wanted Earth gone. Above him, the ceiling showed the stars, real stars, not pictures. The technology here was beyond anything humans had. But that was exactly the problem, wasn't it? Humans didn't wait for permission, they didn't follow the old ways, they made their own technology, their own rules. Captain Park of Earth, a voice boomed through the hall. It came from everywhere at once. You stand before this council accused of leading a species that threatens galactic peace. Ji-Hun looked up at the highest seat. There sat Council Prime Vorthak, a creature that looked like a giant lizard covered in golden scales. Vorthak had lived for over 2,000 years and had seen empires rise and fall. His eyes were older than human civilization. We are here to answer those accusations, Ji-Hun said. His voice carried through the hall, clear and strong. Humanity has always been willing to talk. A sound came from the alien crowd, something between laughter and hissing. A tall, thin creature with blue skin stood up. Talk? Your species destroyed 3 space stations while exploring. You created weapons that break the laws of physics. You refuse to follow any rule we make. Because your rules were made without us, Ji-Hun replied. Earth was never asked to help make these laws. We were told to follow them or leave. And that is exactly what we are here to decide today. Vorthak said. His voice was calm, but there was steel in it. Whether humanity should be allowed to remain in contact with civilized space. Ji-Hun's hands stayed at his sides, but his heart was beating fast. On his ship, his crew was waiting. Minju Kim, his science officer, had run the numbers. The vote would not be close. Too many species had complaints about humans. Too many were afraid. Let the evidence be presented, Vorthak said. What followed was 3 hours of accusations. The Zephyrians complained that human ships had entered their space without permission. The Crystalline Union said humans had stolen their technology and improved it. The Metal Singers claimed that human music was too loud and hurt their sensitive hearing. But the worst accusation came from Ambassador Quell, a creature that looked like a floating jellyfish made of light. The humans, Quell said, do not respect the natural order. They see a law of physics and try to break it. They see an impossible problem and refuse to accept it cannot be solved. This is not wisdom. This is madness. When it was Ji-Hun's turn to speak, he stood and looked around the hall. These beings had built a galaxy-wide civilization. They had ended wars, stopped plagues, created peace between species that had fought for millions of years. They had done amazing things. You are right, Ji-Hun said, and many aliens looked surprised. We do break rules. We do refuse to accept the impossible. But let me ask you something. How many of you tried to build faster than light travel and gave up when you were told it couldn't be done? Silence filled the hall. How many of you accepted that your people would die from diseases because healing them was too hard? How many of you looked at your small single worlds and decided that was enough? Vorthak's eyes narrowed. What is your point, human? My point is that you have built a perfect system for keeping things exactly as they are. You have peace because you stopped trying to grow. You have order because you gave up on dreams, and now you want to punish us for refusing to do the same. More sounds came from the crowd, angry ones this time. Ji-Hun continued. Yes, we make mistakes. Yes, we break things. But we also fix problems you've lived with for centuries. We cure diseases you call incurable. We go to places you call unreachable, not because we're better than you, but because we refuse to believe that impossible is a real word. And that, said a new voice, is exactly why you are dangerous. The speaker, was Counselor Rex, a being made of living metal. You cannot simply ignore the rules that govern reality. Physics exists for a reason. Laws exist for a reason. When you break them, you risk everything, not just for yourselves, but for all of us. Then teach us better ways, Ji-hoon said. Work with us. Help us understand. Don't just lock us away because we're different. We have tried, Vorthak said sadly. For 50 years we have tried. We have sent teachers, shared knowledge, offered guidance. And what have humans done? They have used our gifts to build weapons. They have taken our science and twisted it into something we do not recognize. They have proven again and again that they cannot be trusted to follow even the most basic rules of civilized society. Ji-hoon felt something cold in his stomach. This was not going well. The vote will now be taken, Vorthak announced. All in favor of Resolution 2847 Alpha, the isolation of Sol system, indicate now. Lights began to glow throughout the hall. Red lights, hundreds of them. Each one was a vote to lock Earth away from the galaxy forever. All opposed, indicate now. A few blue lights appeared. Ji-hoon counted them quickly. 23. Only 23 species out of nearly 1,000 were willing to give humanity another chance. The resolution passes, Vorthak said. By the authority of this council, the Sol system will be enclosed by a dimensional barrier, effective immediately. No ships will enter or leave. No communications will pass through. Humanity will have no contact with galactic civilization until such time as they prove they can follow the rules of civilized society. Wait, Ji-hoon said, stepping forward. You can't just... It is done, Vorthak said. As he spoke, alarms began to sound. Emergency lights flashed throughout the hall. Ji-hoon's communicator came alive. It was Minju's voice, full of panic. Captain, something's happening. The space around Earth, it's changing. There's some kind of energy wall building up around the whole system. The barrier is already in place, Vorthak said. We apologize for the lack of warning, but we could not risk human interference. Your ship has perhaps 10 minutes to clear the barrier zone, or you will be trapped inside with your homeworld. Ji-hoon looked around the hall one last time. These beings thought they were being wise. They thought they were protecting the galaxy. But they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. You don't know what you've done, he said quietly. We have saved the galaxy from chaos, Vorthak replied. Now go, return to your people. Perhaps in a few centuries, when humanity has learned patience, we will speak again. Ji-hoon ran from the hall. His boots echoed as he raced through corridors filled with alien architecture. Behind him, he could hear the sounds of the council members talking among themselves, relieved that the human problem had been solved. He reached his ship just as the barrier was becoming visible, a wall of shimmering energy that stretched across space, growing larger by the second. The Earth's sun was already behind it, looking strange and distant through the energy field. Get us out of here, Ji-hoon ordered as he reached the bridge. Already working on it, Minju called back from her station. The barrier. It's incredible technology. I've never seen anything like it. Their ship barely made it out before the barrier closed completely. As they watched from a safe distance, the Sol system disappeared behind walls of impossible energy. Earth, Mars, Jupiter, all the worlds humans called home, were now completely cut off from the galaxy. Captain, said Do-hyun Lee from the communications station, I'm getting a transmission from Earth. It's Admiral Kim. Put it through. A voice came through the speakers, calm, despite everything that had just happened. To all human ships outside, the barrier. This is Admiral Kim speaking from Earth Command. We know what just happened. We know they've locked us away, but I want you all to remember something important. The voice paused, then continued with a strength that made Ji-hoon stand straighter. Humanity doesn't accept cages. We never have and we never will. They think they've solved their human problem, but they've just given us time and motivation. We'll find another way. We always do. The transmission ended, leaving Ji-hoon and his crew staring at the barrier that now separated them from home. Around them, space seemed quieter somehow, as if the galaxy itself was holding its breath. Ji-hoon looked at his crew. humans who were now exiles in their own galaxy. But in their eyes, he didn't see defeat. He saw the same thing he'd seen in Admiral Kim's voice: determination. The Council had just learned something important about humans, even if they didn't know it yet. When you tell a human something is impossible, you don't stop them, you just make them angry. 15 years had passed since the barrier went up around Earth, and the galaxy was peaceful. Trade routes that had been dangerous because of human exploration were now safe. Space stations that humans had accidentally damaged were rebuilt and working perfectly. The Council members congratulated themselves on their wisdom every time they met. The galaxy has never been more stable, Council Prime Vorthak told the Assembly. War is at an all-time low. Economic growth continues across all sectors. Perhaps we should have contained the humans much earlier. The other Council members made sounds of agreement. In the viewing screens around the hall, they could see peaceful star systems, busy trade stations, and happy alien families going about their lives without fear of human chaos. But in the outer rim of the galaxy, in places the Council rarely looked, something different was happening. So-Young Choi stood at the window of Titan Colony, looking out at the ice fields that stretched beyond the dome. She was one of the lucky ones. Her colony had been outside the Sol system when the barrier went up. About 50,000 humans had been scattered across the galaxy when Earth disappeared. Now they were all that was left of humanity in open space. "Any word from the other colonies?" asked Wu Jin Nam as he joined her at the window. He was an engineer, one of the best Earth had ever produced. Now he worked in the colony's maintenance department, fixing water recyclers and air filters. "Same, as always," So-Young replied. "We're all still here, all still working, all still waiting." "Waiting for what?" So-Young smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. For the right moment. Over the past 15 years, something strange had happened to the human colonies. They hadn't just survived, they had thrived. Humans who had been farmers on Earth became expert traders. Engineers like Wu Jin learned alien technologies so well they could improve them. Scientists made discoveries that impressed even the oldest species in the galaxy. But they did it quietly. They followed all the rules. They caused no trouble. They were model citizens of galactic society. That should have made the Council happy. Instead, it was starting to worry some of the smarter Council members. Ambassador Quell floated through the research station orbiting Kepler 442, watching the humans who worked there. They wore the same uniforms as everyone else. They followed the same safety procedures. They turned in their reports on time and never complained about anything. But Quell had been alive for 800 years, and something felt wrong. "Dr. Hyejin Yoon," Quell called to a human woman working at a computer terminal. "Yes, Ambassador?" Hyejin looked up from her work. She was studying alien plant samples, looking for new medicines. It was exactly the kind of boring, useful work the Council loved to see. "Your research has been very impressive lately. The healing compound you discovered last month has already saved thousands of lives." "Thank you, Ambassador. I'm just doing my job." "Yes, but your job used to be studying Earth insects. How did you become so good at alien biology so quickly?" Hyejin's face didn't change, but Quell noticed her hands pause for just a moment before continuing to work. "Humans are good at adapting, Ambassador. We learn fast when we need to." That night, Quell sent a report to the Council. "Something is happening with the human colonies. Their progress is too fast, too perfect, we should investigate." But the Council was busy with other things. The economy was good, peace was holding, and the humans seemed harmless. The report was filed away and forgotten. On the mining station, near Rigel, Wu Jin was having a secret meeting with 12 other humans. They came from different colonies, different jobs, different parts of the galaxy, but they all had one thing in common. They were working on the same problem. "Any progress on the barrier analysis?" Wu Jin asked. A woman named Hyejin, different from the one on Kepler station, pulled out a small device. "I've been studying the energy patterns. The barrier isn't just keeping us out of Earth's system. It's doing something else." "What kind of something else?" "I'm not sure yet, but the energy flows are strange. It's like the barrier is collecting power from somewhere and sending it somewhere else." "Where?" That's what we need to find out. Across the galaxy, in dozens of colonies and hundreds of jobs, humans were having similar conversations. They worked their day jobs perfectly, followed every rule, caused no problems. But at night, in secret, they were working together on something much bigger. They were trying to understand the barrier, and they were learning things that scared them. In the Andromeda system, a human named Tai Hyun Jong made a discovery that changed everything. He was officially a simple maintenance worker at an alien university. Unofficially, he was one of the smartest physicists humanity had ever produced. Late one night, while everyone else was sleeping, Tae-hyun used the university's equipment to run some tests. He was trying to understand how the barrier technology worked, hoping to find a way to contact Earth. What he found instead was much more disturbing. The energy readings from the barrier were wrong. Not just different from what they expected, actually wrong. The laws of physics said one thing, but the barrier was doing something else entirely. Tae-hyun ran the tests again and again, but the results were always the same. The barrier was breaking fundamental rules of reality, and somehow making it work. But that wasn't the scary part. The scary part was that the energy wasn't coming from Council technology. The readings looked human. Tae-hyun sent an encrypted message to other human scientists across the galaxy. We need to meet. Now. Something is very wrong. 3 months later, 12 humans gathered on a small trading station in neutral space. They came from different worlds, but they all brought the same kind of data. Energy readings, physics measurements, and mathematical models that all pointed to one impossible conclusion. Earth isn't just sitting behind that barrier, Tae-hyun explained to the group. They're using it. Somehow they've turned their prison into a power source. That's impossible, said another scientist. The amount of energy involved would require technology. That doesn't exist, Tae-hyun finished. I know, but look at these readings. For 3 days they went over the data. No matter how they looked at it, the conclusion was the same. Earth was doing things behind the barrier that shouldn't be possible, but there was something else in the data that worried them even more. Look at this pattern, Hee-jin Yoon said, pointing to a graph on the screen. The energy spikes happen in regular cycles, like a heartbeat. So they're getting stronger and faster. Whatever Earth is doing behind that barrier, they're building up to something. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, So-young Choi was dealing with a different kind of problem. Her colony had been visited by council inspectors 3 times in the past month. They claimed it was routine, but So-young knew better. The council was starting to notice that human colonies were doing too well. They were asking questions about human research, human trade deals, and human technology improvements. We need to be more careful, she told the colony leaders during an emergency meeting. If they figure out what we're really doing— What are we really doing? Asked one of the colonists. I mean, I know we're all working together, sharing information, trying to help each other. But is that illegal? So-young looked around the room at faces she'd known for 15 years. These people had become her family after Earth was taken away. They'd built a life here, made friends with aliens, become part of galactic society. But they were still human, and humans never forgot where they came from. We're preparing, she said finally. I don't know for what, but we're preparing. Earth is still out there, still working, still refusing to give up. When they're ready, they're going to need us. How do you know? So-young walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the barrier, Earth was still spinning, still full of humans who refused to accept defeat. Because that's what humans do, she said. We survive, we adapt, we prepare, and sooner or later, we find a way to come home. That night, as the colony settled down to sleep, So-young made a decision that would change everything. She activated a communication device she'd been building in secret for 15 years. It used quantum entanglement technology she'd learned from alien textbooks and improved with human stubbornness. The message was simple. Earth, this is the colonies. We're still here. We're still human. And we're ready for whatever you're planning. She sent the message into space, not knowing if it would work, not knowing if anyone would receive it. But somewhere, On the other side of an impossible barrier, Admiral Kim was sitting in his office on Earth when a communication device that shouldn't have existed started beeping. He read the message and smiled for the first time in 15 years. "Well," he said to the empty room, "looks like it's time to show the galaxy what we've been working on." Outside his window, Earth looked very different than it had 15 years ago. The Council thought they had imprisoned humanity. They had no idea they'd just given them the time and privacy they needed to become something entirely new. 25 years after the barrier went up, Dr. Hyejin Yoon was no longer pretending to be a simple researcher. She stood in the center of Kepler Research Station's most secure laboratory, surrounded by equipment that officially didn't exist. "Show me the results again," she said to her assistant, a young human named Taehyun Jang who had transferred to her station 6 months ago. Taehyun pulled up the holographic display. Numbers and equations filled the air around them, but the most important part was simple enough for anyone to understand. It was a graph showing consciousness patterns from different species across the galaxy. "Every species has a baseline," Taehyun explained. "Their thoughts, their dreams, their collective mental energy. It all creates a pattern that we can measure. And human colonies? Look at this." Taehyun highlighted several data points. Human consciousness patterns are different. They're stronger, more focused, and they're affecting the quantum fields around them. Hyejin stared at the data. What Taehyun was showing her was impossible according to everything the galaxy knew about physics. Consciousness wasn't supposed to be able to affect reality directly. Thoughts couldn't change the fundamental forces of the universe, but the evidence was right there in front of them. "It gets stranger," Taehyun continued. "Watch what happens when humans work together." He showed her readings from colonies where humans were cooperating on projects. Their consciousness patterns combine and amplify each other. The effect on local space-time is measurable. How measurable? Remember the Titan colony mining operation last year? They said they hit a rich vein of rare metals by pure luck? Yes. It wasn't luck. Look at this. Taehyun showed her mineral scans from before and after the colonists started working together. The metals weren't there originally. Human consciousness literally created them by refusing to accept that they couldn't find what they needed. Hyejin felt cold. That's impossible. So was faster-than-light travel until humans built it. So was curing Rigelian plague until humans figured it out. So was a lot of things. Before Hyejin could respond, alarms started ringing throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed, and the voice of Station Commander Vex came over the speakers. "All personnel report to emergency stations. We have a Code 7 situation in Laboratory Complex C." Hyejin and Taehyun ran through the corridors, joining streams of other researchers heading toward the emergency. When they reached Complex C, they found chaos. The laboratory was full of energy patterns that hurt to look at. Reality seemed to be bending and twisting in the center of the room, where a team of human and alien scientists had been working on a joint project. "What happened?" Hyejin called to Dr. Zex, the alien project leader. "We were testing a new energy conversion system," Zex replied, his 4 eyes wide with panic. Everything was working perfectly, and then the human team members started discussing improvements. They said the efficiency was too low, that we should be able to get better results. And the machine started working exactly the way they said it should. But that's impossible. The laws of physics don't allow for that kind of efficiency. Hyejin looked at the twisted space in the center of the lab. The humans on the team, she recognized them as engineers from various colonies, were standing calmly, in the middle of the chaos, taking notes. "Turn it off," she called to them. "We're trying to," one of them called back. "But the machine doesn't want to turn off. It's like it's enjoying working better than it's supposed to." It took 4 hours and 3 emergency teams to shut down the device. When the space finally returned to normal, Station Commander Vex called for a full investigation. But Hyejin already knew what they would find. The human engineers hadn't broken any equipment. They hadn't changed any settings. They had simply refused to accept that the machine couldn't work better, and reality had agreed with them. That night, Hyejin sent an encrypted message to human colonies across the galaxy. We need to talk, all of us, now. 3 weeks later, representatives from 47 human colonies gathered at a small trading station in the neutral zone. They came from different worlds, different jobs, different parts of the galaxy, but they all had the same story. Humans were changing reality just by thinking about it. So-Young Choi, now the unofficial leader of the colonial human network, stood before the group. We all know why we're here. Strange things have been happening around human settlements for months. Equipment working better than it should. Problems solving themselves. Resources appearing when we need them most. Murmurs of agreement came from the crowd. The question is, what do we do about it? Hide it, said someone from the back. If the council finds out, they'll panic. They might decide to eliminate all humans, not just isolate Earth. We can't hide this forever, argued another voice. It's getting stronger. Sooner or later, they're going to notice. Yunbi Song stood up. She was a former military officer who now worked as a trade coordinator, but everyone knew she still thought like a soldier. There's something else we need to consider, she said. This didn't start happening randomly. It started happening now, 25 years after the barrier went up. What's your point? My point is that Earth has been quiet for 25 years. No communications, no attempts to break through the barrier, nothing. Either they gave up, or they've been working on something, Taehyun finished. Something that's affecting all of us. Before anyone could respond, every communication device in the room started beeping at the same time. The sound was identical, a pattern none of them had heard before, but somehow all of them recognized. It was a quantum entanglement signal, transmitted on frequencies that shouldn't exist. So-Young activated her communicator. A voice came through, clear as if it was coming from the next room instead of through an impossible barrier from Earth. Colonial Network, this is Earth Command. Admiral Kim speaking. The room fell silent. It was the first contact they'd had with Earth in 25 years. We know you're all together, the Admiral's voice continued. We know about the consciousness effects, the reality alterations, the spontaneous improvements in your technology and resources. We also know you're confused and probably scared, So-Young found her voice. Admiral, how are you reaching us? The barrier should make this impossible. The barrier makes a lot of things impossible. We've spent 25 years learning to do them anyway. There was something different about the Admiral's voice, a confidence that hadn't been there before. We need you to listen carefully. In approximately 72 hours, the barrier is going to fall. When it does, the galaxy is going to see what humanity has become. What do you mean? We mean that the Council made a mistake when they locked us away. They thought they were containing us. Instead, they gave us the privacy we needed to evolve. Evolve into what? The Admiral's laugh came through the communicator and it sounded like music. Into something that doesn't have to follow their rules anymore. Something that can rewrite the rules of physics just by deciding they're wrong. That's what's been happening to us, Hyejin said. Our consciousness has been affecting reality directly. Exactly. The barrier didn't just cut us off from the galaxy. It connected all human consciousness together. Every human in the galaxy, inside the barrier and outside it, has been slowly becoming part of something larger. A hive mind? Yunbi asked, her military training making her suspicious. Not a hive mind. Think of it more like a symphony. Every human is still an individual, but we're all playing the same song. And that song is changing the fundamental nature of reality itself. The room was dead quiet as the implications sank in. The Council is going to panic when they see what we've become, So-Young said. Probably. That's why we're giving you advance warning. In 3 days, you need to be ready to choose. Stay hidden and pretend to be normal, or stand with Earth and help us show the galaxy that there's a better way to live. What kind of better way? A way where impossible problems get solved because we refuse to believe they're impossible. A way where consciousness shapes reality instead of being trapped by it. A way where every species gets to evolve beyond what they thought were their limits. The signal started to fade, but Admiral Kim's voice came through one more time. Humanity has spent 25 years learning to say no to the universe itself. The Council thought they were punishing us for breaking rules. They actually gave Else the time we needed to learn that rules are just suggestions. The communication ended, leaving the room in silence. Finally, Yun Bisong stood up. "Well," she said with a grim smile, "this should be interesting." Across the galaxy, Council monitoring, stations started detecting strange energy readings. Reality itself seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for something that was about to happen. In his office on Nexus Prime, Council Prime Vorthak felt a chill run down his ancient spine. He didn't know why, but something told him that the peaceful years were about to end. On Earth, behind a barrier that was already beginning to crack, Admiral Kim looked out his window at a world that the Council wouldn't recognize. Where one planet had once orbited the sun, 3 massive worlds now hung in space, connected by bridges of pure energy, and on all 3 worlds, 7 billion humans were getting ready to remind the galaxy why they had been feared in the first place. The quiet years were over. The barrier fell at exactly 1437 Galactic Standard Time on a Tuesday. Council Prime Vorthak was reviewing trade reports when every alarm in Nexus Prime started screaming at once. Emergency lights bathed the council chambers in red as technicians ran through the corridors shouting about impossible sensor readings. "What is happening?" Vorthak demanded as he entered the main control room. "The barrier around Sol system," gasped Chief Technician Crix, his tentacles trembling as he worked at multiple control panels. "It's gone. Just vanished." "That's impossible. The barrier was designed to last for millennia." "Sir, you need to see this." Crix brought up the main display screen. Vorthak stared in silence at what had once been the Sol system. Where Earth had orbited alone 25 years ago, 3 massive planets now hung in space. They were connected by streams of energy that sparkled like captured starlight, and around them orbited structures the size of moons. "How many planets are there supposed to be in that system?" Vorthak asked quietly. "1 inhabited world, sir. Earth. Plus the gas giants and rocky planets, but now there are 3 Earths." As they watched, ships began emerging from the Sol system. But these weren't the crude metal vessels humans had used before. These ships seemed to be made of crystallized light, and they moved through space in ways that hurt to look at. Not following straight lines, but somehow being exactly where they needed to be. "Get me a communication channel," Vorthak ordered. "Sir, we're trying, but their signals are on frequencies that don't exist." "What do you mean they don't exist?" "I mean the mathematics say these frequencies are impossible, but they're working." Anyway, before Vorthak could respond, every screen in the control room came alive with the same image, a human face he remembered from 25 years ago. "Greetings, Council Prime Vorthak," said the man who had once been Admiral Kim. He looked the same age as before, but his eyes held depths that seemed to go on forever. "My name is Hyunwoo Shin, Chancellor of the Reformed Earth Coalition. We need to talk." "Chancellor Shin," Vorthak said carefully, "what has happened to your system?" "We've been busy. Turns out that when you give humanity 25 years of uninterrupted time, we tend to improve things. You created 2 additional planets? We didn't create them. We convinced the universe that they had always existed. There's a difference, though I suppose it's a subtle one." Vorthak felt something cold in his stomach. "That's impossible." "So you keep saying. We've noticed that the galaxy is very fond of that word. Impossible. We've decided we don't like it very much." On the screen, Hyunwoo gestured, and the view changed to show one of the impossible ships moving through space. "This vessel is traveling faster than light without using hyperdrive technology. The pilot is simply refusing to believe that distance is real. Physics doesn't work that way." "It does now. Physics, as it turns out, is quite reasonable once you explain things properly. We've had many interesting conversations with the fundamental forces of the universe over the past 25 years. Around the control room, alien technicians stared at their instruments in growing panic. The readings showed energy levels that shouldn't exist, mathematical constants that were changing in real time, and violations of causality so severe that several computers had simply stopped working rather than try to process them. "What do you want?" Vorthak asked. "To show you something amazing." We'd like to invite a delegation from the Council to visit Earth, see what we've accomplished, learn about the possibilities we've discovered. And if we refuse? Hyunwoo's smile never wavered, but something in his eyes shifted. We hope you won't. The universe is so much more interesting when you stop believing in limitations. The communication ended, leaving the control room in chaos. 3 hours later, despite every instinct telling him it was a terrible idea, Vorthak found himself aboard a council diplomatic vessel approaching the Sol system. With him were 12 other council members, representing the most powerful species in the galaxy. As they crossed into the system, their ship's sensors began reporting impossible readings. The first planet, reported Navigator Zex, appears to be the original Earth, but it's been expanded. The continents are larger, there are new mountain ranges, and the oceans are deeper. Gravity should be crushing everything, but somehow it's exactly the same as it was before. The second planet looks like Earth, but everything is different. Different continents, different weather patterns, different ecosystems. It's like someone took the concept of Earth and reimagined it entirely. And the third planet? Vorthak asked. The third planet is the strangest of all. It appears to be Earth, but from different time periods all existing at once. I can see medieval castles next to futuristic cities, with dinosaurs grazing in fields next to spaceports. How is that possible? According to our instruments, it's not possible, but it's happening anyway. Their ship was guided to a docking station that looked like it was built from crystallized music. As they disembarked, humans greeted them. But these humans were different from the ones they remembered. They looked the same, mostly. 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head. But there was something in their eyes, something in the way they moved that suggested they had become more than they had been. Welcome to the Sol system, said a woman who introduced herself as Yeji Ko, Master Builder. We're excited to show you what we've accomplished. How did you create 3 planets? Demanded Counselor Rex, the living metal being who had argued for humanity's banishment. We didn't create anything, Yeji replied. We simply convinced reality that Earth needed more room to grow. Reality was very understanding once we explained our needs properly. They were taken on a tour that defied everything the Council thought. They knew about science. They saw cities that existed in multiple dimensions at once, allowing millions of people to live in the same space without crowding. They saw farms where crops grew faster and larger simply because the farmers refused to accept normal growing seasons. They met with Shungyun Lim, director of what humans called the Impossibility Department. His job, he explained, was to solve problems that couldn't be solved. For example, Shungyun said, showing them a device the size of a small room. Energy conservation. The old physics said you couldn't create energy from nothing. But we asked, the universe, why not? And it didn't have a good answer. So now this machine produces unlimited clean energy by convincing empty space that it's actually full of power. That violates the most basic laws of thermodynamics, protested Dr. Vellum, the Council's chief scientist. Only if you believe those laws are absolute, Shungyun replied. We've found that the universe is much more flexible than most species assume. You just have to know how to ask nicely. The tour continued for hours. They saw humans who could exist in multiple places at once, solving problems on different worlds simultaneously. They met children who were learning to reshape matter with their thoughts. They visited laboratories where the laws of physics were treated more like guidelines than absolute rules. How is this possible? Vorthak finally asked Hyunwoo, as they stood on an observation deck overlooking the 3 Earths. The barrier you put around us had an unexpected side effect, Hyunwoo explained. It connected every human consciousness together, not just on Earth but throughout the galaxy. We became something like a distributed mind, with 7 billion individual perspectives all working on the same problems. A hive mind? Not exactly. Each human is still individual, still unique. But we're all part of something larger now. When one of us learns something, we all learn it. When one of us solves a problem, we all know the solution. And when all of us decide that something is possible, reality tends to agree with us. But the laws of physics are descriptions of how reality usually works, not commands about how it must work. We've spent 25 years teaching reality that it has more options than it thought. Vorthak looked out at the impossible sight of 3 Earths connected by bridges of light. What do you want from the galaxy? We want to share what we've learned. Every species in the galaxy has problems they think can't be solved, limitations they think can't be overcome. We can show them they're wrong. And if they refuse? Hyunwoo's expression didn't change, but Vorthak felt a chill anyway. Then they'll continue living the way they always have, and we'll continue growing beyond what they thought was possible, but we hope they'll choose to grow with us. The Council will never accept this. What you've done, what you've become, it threatens everything we've built. Does it? Or does it offer the chance to build something better? Before Vorthak could answer, an alarm sounded throughout the station. A human technician approached Hyunwoo with a concerned expression. Chancellor, we're detecting massive fleet movements throughout the galaxy. It looks like the Council is mobilizing for war. Hyunwoo nodded sadly. We expected this. Fear makes people do predictable things. Will you defend yourselves? Vorthak asked. Defend? No. Hyunwoo looked out at the 3 Earths, where 7 billion humans were living lives that should have been impossible. We'll do something much worse than defend ourselves. What's that? We'll prove that war itself is just another problem that can be solved. As the Council delegation was escorted back to their ship, Vorthak realized that they had just witnessed something that would change the galaxy forever. Humanity hadn't just escaped their prison. They had evolved beyond the need. The largest fleet in galactic history assembled at Rigel 7. 3,000 ships from 200 species, all united in one purpose: to stop humanity before they could spread their impossible ideas any further. Admiral Gorth of the Crystalline Union stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching his fleet prepare for battle. His species had fought wars for millions of years, and he knew how to destroy things that threatened galactic order. Final systems check, he ordered his crew. All weapons armed, shields at maximum, hyperspace inhibitors active. Humanity may have learned new tricks, but they still bleed. Around him, officers from dozens of species worked at their stations. They had plasma cannons that could crack planets, energy shields that had never been broken, and enough firepower to destroy solar systems. They were about to learn that firepower meant nothing when your enemy refused to believe in death. The human fleet appeared without warning. One moment the space around Rigel 7 was empty. The next moment it was full of ships that looked like they were made from crystallized light and impossible dreams. Enemy fleet detected, called the sensor operator. Counting. Sir, the numbers keep changing. What do you mean changing? I mean I count 50 ships, then 100, then 50 again. It's like they're existing in multiple quantities at the same time. Admiral Gorth frowned. Just give me your best estimate. Sir, I don't think quantity applies to them anymore. Before Gorth could respond, a communication came through on all channels. The face of Admiral Yunbi Song appeared on every screen in the Council fleet. But this wasn't the Yunbi who had worked quietly in colonies for 25 years. This Yunbi existed in several dimensions at once, her image shifting and blending in ways that hurt to look at. Council fleet! Her voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once. This is Admiral Yunbi Song of the Humanity Defense Force. We don't want to fight you. Then surrender, Admiral Gorth transmitted back. We can't surrender to people who don't understand what they're trying to fight, but we can show you. All ships open fire, Gorth commanded. 3,000 ships unleashed their weapons at once. Energy beams that could melt mountains, missiles that could destroy cities, and plasma bolts that could pierce any known armor streaked across space toward the human fleet. The weapons passed right through the human ships without doing any damage. What happened? Gorth demanded. Sir, the energy readings are impossible. The human ships are there, but they're also not there. They exist in the spaces between spaces. That's nonsense. Fire again. The second barrage had the same result. The weapons passed through empty space, even though everyone could see the human ships exactly where they were aiming. Admiral Gorth, Yunbi's voice came again. You're trying to destroy ships that have decided not to be destructible. It's not going to work. Nothing is indestructible. You're right, but we're not indestructible. We're just consciously objecting to the concept of destruction. As she spoke, the human ships began to return fire. But their weapons weren't energy beams or missiles. They were streams of pure possibility, waves of potential that washed over the Council fleet. "Damage report," Gorth called. "Sir, we're not damaged. We're improved." "What?" The tactical officer stared at his instruments in amazement. "Our engines are running at 150% efficiency. Our shields are stronger than they've ever been. Our weapons systems are performing beyond their design specifications." "How is that possible?" "The human weapons aren't trying to hurt us, sir. They're trying to help us." Across the Council fleet, similar reports came in. Ships that had been damaged in previous battles found their hull breaches healing themselves. Engines that had been running poorly were suddenly working perfectly. Crew members who had been sick were feeling better than they had in years. "This is Admiral Song again." Yunbi's voice came through the communications. "We told you we didn't want to fight. Instead, we're going to demonstrate what cooperation can accomplish. You can't just fix our ships without permission." "We can't? Watch this." One of the Council ships, a massive dreadnought from the Metal Singer species, began to glow with soft light. As the fleet watched, the ship started to change. Its armor became smoother, its weapons more elegant, its design more beautiful, but it was still recognizably the same ship, just better. "What are you doing to us?" the Metal Singer captain transmitted. "We're showing you what your ships could be if they weren't limited by what you think is possible," Yunbi replied. "Your dreadnought is now capable of faster-than-light travel without a hyperdrive. Its weapons can heal instead of harm. Its armor is stronger than any material in the galaxy, but it's also transparent to friendly fire." Admiral Gorth watched as more Council ships began to transform. They became more efficient, more beautiful, more capable than their designers had ever dreamed. But they were also becoming something else. They were becoming impossible. "This is a trick," he said. "Some kind of illusion or mind control." "Test it," Yunbi challenged. "Order one of your transformed ships to fire on an asteroid, see what happens." Against his better judgment, Gorth gave the order. The transformed ship fired a beam of energy at a nearby asteroid. The asteroid didn't explode. Instead, it became a small garden world, complete with atmosphere, oceans, and the beginnings of life. "Your weapon just created a planet instead of destroying a rock," Yunbi observed. "How does that make you feel?" Gorth stared at the new world spinning peacefully in space where an asteroid had been moments before. His species had spent millions of years building weapons to destroy their enemies. Now he was looking at a weapon that created life instead. "This is madness," he whispered. "This is possibility. This is what happens when you stop believing that the universe is limited by rules that someone else made up. The laws of physics are descriptions, not commandments. We've spent 25 years learning to have conversations with reality. It turns out reality is much more reasonable than most species assume." Around the fleet, something unprecedented was happening. Council crews were looking at their transformed ships and beginning to understand what Yunbi was showing them. These weren't weapons of war anymore. They were tools for building something better. "Admiral," his communication officer called to Gorth, "I'm getting reports from across the fleet. Crews are requesting permission to accept the human modifications permanently." "Denied." "Sir, the Zephyrian captain says his ship can now travel anywhere in the galaxy instantly without using fuel. The Crystalline Union vessels report that their weapons can now cure any disease. I said denied, but it was too late." Across the fleet, ships were choosing for themselves. They flickered and changed, accepting the impossible modifications the humans had offered. Within an hour, half the Council fleet had become something entirely different. "This is Admiral Wu Jin Nam," a new voice came through the communications. But like Yunbi, this wasn't the Wu Jin who had worked as a maintenance engineer in the colonies. This Wu Jin existed as pure consciousness, speaking through ships themselves. "I apologize for appearing in this manner, but I've found that living as a starship is much more efficient than being confined to a human body." You're You're a ship? Gorth asked. I'm a human who decided that the difference between flesh and metal was just another artificial limitation. I exist in all the transformed vessels now, helping their crews understand their new capabilities. This is an invasion. This is an invitation. We're not conquering your ships. We're showing them what they could become if they weren't afraid to grow. Admiral Gorth looked around his bridge. His crew was staring at their instruments with wonder instead of fear. The ship itself seemed to be humming with new possibilities. Sir, his tactical officer said quietly, request permission to accept the human modifications. Absolutely not. Sir, we could end hunger in our home system with these new capabilities. We could cure diseases that have plagued our people for centuries. We could explore parts of the universe we never dreamed of reaching. At what cost? What cost? Yunbi's voice came again. The only cost is admitting that you were wrong about what's possible. Gorth stared out at his fleet. The ships that had accepted the human modifications were beautiful beyond description, capable of feats that should have been impossible. The crews were reporting the highest morale in military history. What happens to the ships that refuse your gifts? He asked. Nothing. They remain exactly as they are. We won't force change on anyone who doesn't want it. And the war? What war? You came here to fight an enemy, but we're not your enemies. We're your teachers if you want to learn. Your healers if you want to be healed. Your partners if you want to build something amazing together. Admiral Gorth closed his eyes and made the hardest decision of his military career. All ships, he broadcast to his fleet, stand down from combat status. Accept human modifications if you choose to do so. This engagement is over. As he gave the order, his own ship began to transform. The bridge became more spacious, the controls more intuitive, the whole vessel more alive than it had ever been. Welcome to the new reality, Admiral, Yunbi said with warmth in her voice. You're going to love what's possible now. Across the galaxy, Council monitoring stations detected the impossible, their largest war if. 1 year later, the galaxy was unrecognizable. The Grand Assembly Hall on Nexus Prime still existed, but it was no longer the center of galactic government. The rigid rows of seats had been replaced by flowing spaces where representatives from hundreds of species worked together in ways that had once been impossible. Former Council Prime Vorthak stood at what used to be his podium, but he was no longer giving orders. Instead, he was learning. At 2,000 years old, he was discovering that there were still infinite possibilities he had never imagined. The Andromedan colonies report successful contact, announced Minju Kim, who served as humanity's ambassador of impossible things. She existed in 17 locations at once, coordinating projects across the galaxy while maintaining a cheerful presence wherever she was needed. Contact with what? Asked Vorthak. Other versions of themselves from parallel dimensions. Turns out there are infinite realities running alongside this one. And travel between them is quite simple once you stop believing in the limitations of single-dimension existence. Around the hall, beings that had once been separate species worked, together on projects that defied every law of physics the galaxy had ever known. Zephyrians who had learned to exist as pure thought collaborated with metal singers who had become living music. Crystalline Union members had discovered they could grow into planet-sized gardens where other species could live in perfect harmony. Status. Report on the Rigel expansion project, Vorthak asked. Proceeding ahead of schedule, replied Soyoung Choi, who had become the coordinator of galactic growth. We've convinced 7 star systems that they have enough space for triple their current populations, and reality has been very accommodating. The new worlds are already developing unique ecosystems. Any problems? Just one. Some of the older, Council species are still nervous about the changes. They keep asking if it's safe to live on planets that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. And you told them? That safety is a choice, not a condition. The planets are as safe as their inhabitants decide they want them to be. At the center of the hall, a holographic display showed the current status of galactic civilization. Where once there had been rigid borders between species territories, now there were fluid networks of cooperation. Trade routes had become streams of shared consciousness. Military fleets had transformed into exploration vessels that discovered new possibilities instead of conquering new worlds. Report from the Deep Space Exploration Division? Vorthak requested. Hyunwoo Shin materialized in the hall, though he was simultaneously overseeing the construction of 17 new star systems in the Outer Rim. We've made contact with civilizations in 12 other galaxies. They're very interested in our approaches to consciousness expansion and reality modification. How are they reacting to our methods? About the same way you did initially. Fear, disbelief, accusations of impossibility. But they're coming around. The Spiral Galaxy Coalition has already requested a delegation to learn about voluntary evolution. And the species that want to remain unchanged? They're protected and respected exactly as we promised. We've created stable zones where the old physics still apply and traditional limitations are maintained. About 30% of galactic species have chosen to remain in those areas. Vorthak nodded. When humanity had first offered to share their discoveries, he had feared it would mean the end of everything he knew. Instead, it had meant the beginning of everything he had never dared to dream. Personal update, if I may? Vorthak asked. Of course. My species has lived for millions of years believing that wisdom came from accepting limitations. In the past year, I have learned that true wisdom comes from questioning whether those limitations were ever real in the first place. How does that feel? Vorthak considered the question. His people had words for many emotions, but they had never developed language for the feeling of infinite possibility opening up before them. Terrifying and wonderful, he said finally. Like being born again, but into a universe where anything can happen. That's exactly what happened, Hyunwoo agreed. The universe you knew was just the first draft. We're all writing the final version together now. Across the hall, representatives continued their work. A group of former weapons engineers were designing tools that could terraform dead worlds by convincing them they had always been alive. Xenobiologists were discovering that evolution could work backwards, forwards, and sideways through time simultaneously. Physicists had given up trying to describe reality and had started negotiating with it directly. Status on the Earth integration project? Vorthak asked. The 3 Earths are now connected to 47 other worlds that chose to become Earth-like, reported Yeji Ko, the master builder. The cultural exchange has been extraordinary. We have medieval knights learning quantum physics from dinosaur scientists while future humans teach ancient wisdom to alien children who exist as geometric patterns. Any conflicts? The usual creative disagreements about whether gravity should be optional on Tuesdays, but nothing serious. Consciousness communities tend to resolve their differences through consensus rather than conflict. And the original human colonies? They're thriving, said Yunbi Song, though she was currently existing as a fleet of exploration vessels discovering new forms of life in the space between atoms. Every human settlement has become a center of impossibility research. They're teaching other species how to achieve the same consciousness expansion that we experienced during the barrier years. Speaking of which, Vorthak said, we should address the question that many council species are still asking. Which question is that? Whether humanity is still human. The hall fell quiet as beings from hundreds of species considered the question. What did it mean to be human when humans could exist as starships, geometric patterns, living music, or pure consciousness? What did it mean to be any species when the boundaries between different forms of life had become voluntary rather than fixed? I think, said a voice from the center of the hall. That's the wrong question. Everyone turned to see Admiral Kim, the original voice of resistance from behind the barrier. But he appeared as he had been 30 years ago when Earth was first. Imprisoned, an ordinary human in an ordinary uniform. The right question, he continued, is not whether we're still human. The right question is whether being human was ever about the shape of our bodies or the limitations of our minds. What do you think the answer is? Vorthak asked. I think being human was always about refusing to accept that impossible problems can't be solved, about looking at rules and asking why they have to apply to us, about taking whatever limitations we're given and figuring out how to transcend them. Admiral Kim gestured around the hall at beings who existed in forms that would have been unimaginable just 2 years ago. Every species in this hall has learned to do those things now. Every being here has discovered what humans learned behind the barrier. That consciousness can reshape reality if you're willing to believe in possibilities instead of limitations. So are we all human now? Someone asked. No. Admiral Kim smiled. We're all whatever we choose to be, which is something humans always believed was possible. The rest of you just needed time to learn it. As the session continued, reports came in from across the galaxy. New worlds were choosing to exist. Dead stars were deciding to reignite. Species that had been extinct for millions of years were returning because their descendants refused to accept that death was permanent. At the edge of the galaxy, monitoring stations detected something that should have been impossible. Signals from other universes, other realities where different versions of consciousness had learned to transcend their own limitations. It appears, Vorthak observed, that we are not the only reality that has discovered these possibilities. Of course, not, Hyunwoo said. Consciousness exists everywhere, in every form, in every possible universe. We just happen to be the first in our local area to figure out how to use it properly. And now we share what we've learned. We help other realities, other universes, other forms of existence discover what they're truly capable of. As the day's session ended, beings dispersed to projects that spanned multiple dimensions and several different concepts of time. Some returned to traditional forms to work on traditional problems. Others existed as pure possibility, exploring the spaces between thoughts and the colors between light. Vorthak remained in the hall, looking up through the transparent ceiling at stars that now danced in patterns that spelled out messages of hope in languages that hadn't existed a year ago. A year ago, he had feared that humanity would destroy galactic civilization. Instead, they had shown the galaxy that civilization could become anything it wanted to be, as long as it was willing to grow beyond what it thought was possible. In the distance, a signal was being transmitted toward other galaxies, other clusters of conscious beings who might be ready to learn what the Milky Way had discovered. The message was simple. The rules you think govern reality are just suggestions. We've learned to write new ones. If you're interested in finding out what's really possible, we're here to help. Signed, the species that learned to say no to the universe itself, and the thousands of other species who decided to join them. As Vorthak watched the message travel faster than